Hi, this is Lawrence from Bible Unhinged. History remembers Judas Iscariot for one infamous act, betraying Jesus with a kiss for 30 pieces of silver. But when it comes to what happened next, how Judas died, the New Testament gives us two accounts that at first glance seem difficult to reconcile. In Matthew 27:3-10, we read that Judas, overcome with remorse, returned the blood money to the chief priest, declared, "I have sinned by betraying innocent blood," and then went away and hanged himself. The priest, unable to put the money in the temple treasury because it was blood money, used it to buy a potter's field as a burial place for foreigners. That field, Matthew tells us, became known as the Field of Blood. But if we turn to Acts 1:18-19, written by Luke, we get a different picture. With the payment he received for his wickedness, Judas bought a field. There he fell headlong, his body burst open, and all his intestines spilled out. Everyone in Jerusalem heard about this, so they called that field in their language Akeldama, that is, field of blood. So which is it? Did Judas hang himself, or did he fall headlong in a field? Did the priest buy the field, or did Judas? And why is it called the Field of Blood? Because it was purchased with blood money, or because Judas's blood was spilled there? This apparent contradiction has troubled readers for centuries and has been seized upon by skeptics as evidence of the Bible's unreliability. But before we jump to conclusions, let's explore the various ways scholars and faith traditions have approached this tension. The most straightforward harmonization suggests both accounts are true but incomplete. Judas hanged himself, as Matthew describes, but later, perhaps when the body was being removed or after decomposition had begun, the rope or branch broke, causing his body to fall and burst open as described in Acts. This explanation, dating back to early Christian commentators like Papias around 110 CE, combines both accounts into a single sequence of events. Augustine of Hippo, one of Christianity's most influential theologians, favored this explanation in the 4th century. He suggested that Matthew focused on Judas's suicidal intent, while Luke emphasized the gruesome aftermath, with neither account giving the complete picture. But there are other possibilities. The accounts differ in who purchased the field. Matthew says the priest bought it with Judas's return money, while Acts suggests Judas bought it himself. Perhaps the priest made the purchase in Judas's name or used his money, making both statements technically accurate from different perspectives. The Greek in Acts 1:18 allows for an interpretation that Judas became the owner of, or was the occasion for acquiring the field, rather than literally purchasing it himself. Since the field was bought with his blood money, Luke might be attributing the purchase to Judas in a causal sense, even if he didn't physically make the transaction. Another approach focuses on the literary purposes of the two authors. Matthew, writing primarily for a Jewish audience, deliberately connects Judas's death to Old Testament prophecies, particularly Zechariah 11:12-13, which mentions 30 pieces of silver and a potter. His account emphasizes fulfillment of prophecy. Luke, writing in Acts for a broader Gentile audience, might be more concerned with demonstrating divine justice, Judas's gruesome death serving as a warning about betraying God's anointed. The differences might reflect not historical contradiction, but different theological emphases. It's worth noting that ancient biographical writing followed different conventions than modern historiography. Ancient authors often compressed timelines, rearranged events for thematic purposes, and focused on the meaning of events rather than precise chronological details. Some scholars suggest the two accounts might preserve different early Christian traditions about Judas's fate. The early church spread rapidly across the Mediterranean world, with stories initially passing through oral tradition before being written down. Different communities might have preserved different details about Judas's death. The Dead Sea Scrolls and other ancient Jewish texts reveal that multiple versions of the same story often circulated in ancient Judaism without causing concern. Perhaps the Gospel writers saw no contradiction in preserving different aspects of tradition rather than harmonizing them artificially. Looking at linguistic clues, some have noted that the Aramaic word for hung could be confused with a word meaning swelled up when translated into Greek, potentially explaining the difference between hanging and bursting open. However, most scholars find this explanation unlikely given Matthew's clear Greek terminology for hanging. Historical context provides other insights. Public suicide by hanging would have been considered shameful in ancient Jewish culture and might have been downplayed or described euphemistically in some circles. Conversely, a gruesome accidental death might be emphasized as divine punishment. The naming of the Field of Blood also has multiple possible explanations. In Matthew, it's called this because it was purchased with blood money. In Acts, the name seems connected to Judas's bloody death. Perhaps both factors contributed to the field's nickname among Jerusalem residents. Archaeological evidence offers additional context. The traditional site identified as Akeldama is on a steep hillside in Jerusalem's Hinnom Valley. If Judas hanged himself from a tree on this hillside, and the body later fell onto the rocks below, both accounts could be geographically compatible. Some interpreters have suggested the divergent accounts of Judas's death might have theological significance. Matthew shows Judas expressing remorse, potentially leaving open questions about his final spiritual state, while Acts emphasizes divine judgment. The different accounts might preserve different communal reflections on betrayal, remorse, and judgment. This tension between the accounts has even influenced art and literature. Medieval paintings often show Judas hanging while demons pull his intestines out through his navel, attempting to harmonize both biblical descriptions. Dante places Judas in the lowest circle of hell in his Inferno, being eternally consumed in Satan's mouth, yet another interpretation of the betrayer's fate. So, what are we to make of these differences? Perhaps they remind us that the Bible's writers were less concerned with providing forensic details than with conveying the moral and theological significance of events. The core message, that Judas met a tragic end after his betrayal, remains consistent across both accounts. Rather than a problem to solve, maybe these differences invite us to consider how we read ancient texts, not with expectations of modern journalistic reporting, but with appreciation for how different narrators preserve different aspects of tradition to serve different purposes. Some readers might find these discrepancies troubling, suggesting human error in the biblical record. Others might see them as evidence of authenticity, the kind of minor variations one would expect in independent accounts of the same events, rather than carefully harmonized fiction. What do you think about these different accounts of Judas's death? Do they challenge your understanding of biblical reliability, or do they deepen your appreciation for the Bible's literary complexity? Are these contradictions to be resolved, or complementary perspectives to be embraced? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Like and subscribe for more of this type of discussion.